Well, our next guest, he is a young man that I met a few years ago at a conference in Florida. And one thing that intrigued me about Jacob was just his charisma and his smile and his enthusiasm. It seemed like he was a very motivated individual, was excited about where his future was in life. I know he's a lot younger than I am. And it's just been intriguing to be able to meet him a few times since. I can see the passion or hear the passion in him. And I'm excited to learn a little bit more about what he does and what motivates him, what drives him, what some of his experiences have been. It's just interesting sometimes to see young people who are so motivated and yet they don't maybe have all the life experiences that older folks have. And so as a young person that wanted to accomplish things, I felt like sometimes older folks poured fire on my enthusiasm. So it's kind of a battle to have all this focus and drive and desire, and yet maybe not have the life experiences. So I'm always interested in learning about people and how they view that whole process. So with that, I want to welcome you to the Max Growth Podcast. I'm Gary, your host, and I have my co-host Heather with me today. And we are going to call Jacob Lee and get him on the phone and ask him some questions and learn some things about what it is that gives him his fire each day. Hey, Jacob, this is Gary Bontrager. How are you today?
I am doing good.
Good. I have Heather, my co-host, here with me. And if you're ready, we're ready to dive in here a little bit and get started with this podcast. To start with, for an introduction, I'm going to let you give us an introduction, a little bit about yourself, maybe, how you grew up as far as brothers, sisters, and what got you to where you're at today.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I grew up, I was born in an Amish community, so I kind of grew up from very conservative culture. And as I was growing up, my family moved to South America when I was, I think, 12 or 13. And so I lived abroad for a few years, and it very strongly shaped, my entrepreneurial kind of mindset, I guess. And then when I moved back to the U.S. and got married, it kind of come from an extremely poor background. I think that really motivated me to go out and start my own business. I just couldn't see a huge future working for somebody else, coming from, if you have zero resources, nothing, you have very little resources to start. You didn't even have guns. You didn't have anything you could sell. You just basically had to start from absolutely nothing. And so it was actually very good because it forced me to get out of my comfort zone. And I said, well, I got to start a business if I want to accomplish anything significant.
So your parents are still missionaries, or did they move back as well?
They moved back as well.
Okay.
And yeah, I grew up in a family. There's 13 of us, or
okay.
There was 13 of us. We lost a brother a few years back, about 9 years ago.
Okay. Well, what's interesting, I guess, I met you a few years ago at a conference in Florida once I went back and started to research a few things. And I guess I look back and I see this in you every time I see you. You seem to always be smiling and being positive. And I feel like you've got a lot of energy. And so that's always intriguing to me to see young people with that. So we'll get into more of that a little bit as we get through this. What's your morning routine?
Well, I do like getting up. I mean, depending on the year, it changes a little bit. During the winter, I don't get up quite as early. But typically, the first thing in the morning, I'll get up and, you shower, shave. And my oldest daughter is disabled. So, I take care of her and make the coffee, and then read my Bible. I read my Bible kind of a lot, partly because I'm always looking for good content for my podcast, and secondly, it is really important. I do believe so.
Sure.
And then depending on if I'm traveling or not. Usually I travel kind of a lot, so my schedule changes a lot if I travel. Very typical, a lot of very early mornings. So, if you're flying anywhere, I mean, I live 2 hours from the airport. I always try to get the earliest flight, so 5:30, 6 o'clock. So, leave my house at, anywhere from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock in the morning. So on days like that, I will, skip some of my morning routine. Yeah.
Certainly.
That can make for a very long day if you're kicking it off that early.
Oh, but I love it, man. You get so much done. Oh,
That's true. There's a lot to be said for that.
I find that really interesting because morning people love early mornings. I'm not a morning person, although I've kind of forced a change in that habit because you're right. It's a way to get a lot of things accomplished.
Yeah. I don't really enjoy it, to be quite frank with you. I don't enjoy getting up early morning.
You just like the results, huh?
I like getting up. Okay, I like the result that you get. I have a hard time forcing myself to get up I cannot get up at 4 o'clock every morning consistently. Not if you got a lot of little children in the house, then, they don't really go to bed until, especially if you got a baby in the house, they don't go to bed until, 10:30, 11 o'clock. And there's just nothing you can do about it. And so getting up too terribly early is a little bit more difficult. But typically I wouldn't get up earlier than 5 o'clock.
That's interesting you say that, because when my kids were little, I would tend to, I would get up earlier before I had children. After I had them, it was what you said. It's like you want to get them in bed, and then I'd just try to stay awake for an hour to enjoy some peace and quiet, because they invariably wake you up in the morning too. So
yeah, I'm a night owl. I get so much accomplished in the evenings. Like I'm such a night owl. My mind is functioning at extremely high level in the evenings. It's just how I'm wired.
We're going to ask you some rapid fire questions. You didn't get these. These are just going to be off the wall, and it's just to kind of get your blood pumping and maybe create some conversation as well. But what is your cell phone wallpaper?
My cell phone wallpaper right now is a 10-step plan that I'm following to get to the next level of my business.
Awesome. I love that. That's what we call setting goals and putting steps in place. I love that one.
Yep, absolutely.
If you could start a charity, what would it be for?
Well, I kind of already do some. It'd probably be more for entrepreneurial startups in very undercapitalized nations.
Okay.
So third world countries, or even the United States for that matter. It'd probably be a foundation for helping young entrepreneurs get started, help them get consultants, or maybe not so much as consultants, as coaches, or the right mentors in place for them.
Awesome. That's awesome. We, obviously there's so much to learn from so many people, and sometimes we just need the right people and the right breaks to reach those next levels. How did you get that scar?
Scar? You mean?
I don't know. I have no idea. Maybe you don't have any.
I do have a scar. I got a big, huge scar on the back of my left hand. I got a big, huge scar. When I was a kid, we had this little pony. It was like a little halfling, a little wild little thing.
They all are.
And it was kind of a bad one. So you put the saddle on her. I didn't have the strength, and they kind of blow themselves up, and I cinched the saddle, but it wasn't quite tight enough. And I got on her and started riding. Well, she let her breath back out, and now the saddle is loose, and I swivel around underneath her, and I'm being dragged underneath the saddle, and like it freaked me out. I was barefooted, but my foot caught in the stirrup. I guess my foot was wet or something. Anyway, and she stepped on my hand, and she was like sharp shot. So it ripped open the back of my hand. Thankfully, that's all that happened. It could have been much worse. But yeah.
Wow, that's quite a story. You're right. I grew up with ponies too, but I usually tried to jump off before I ended up at the bottom of them.
It was just I was underneath it. I think I was in the third grade.
Okay.
That's definitely my biggest scar. I got all kinds of scars.
Just a little guy then.
Yeah. I'm
That's
always doing something crazy.
Well, that's all right. That's what keeps life exciting. I'm gonna move on, get a little bit more serious, maybe. But at what age do you want to retire?
Well, I'm never going to retire, to be quite frank with you. I so much love business. Like, I live business. People talk about how they enjoy hunting and fishing. I enjoy business like hunting and fishing. Um, like I enjoy it so much. So I don't think I'll ever retire in that sense of the word. But I'm sure that as I get older, I don't really have a specific date in mind. I could retire now. I mean, so to speak, I could retire. You'll retire from some companies, or you put other people in position to take over a company, and then you kind of step back and let them lead a little bit more. I think that does happen, and I've already sort of done that into roofing. I spend much less time on roofing than I used to, but I don't think I'll ever retire in what most people see as retirement.
Sure. So, not in the traditional sense. I guess if you don't enjoy, do you have any hobbies other than work, or how do you avoid burnout or kind of keep your mind fresh?
Well, I do love traveling. I've always, one of the things that is, whenever I feel burnout in business, there's nothing to me like going on a trip. You have a half a dozen meetings to do. You go on a trip, you do these meetings, and you just have a relaxing. I love flying. Like, so when I'm in the air, it's always rejuvenated me flying. That's why I love flying anywhere I can, commercially or otherwise. Because what happens is you're up in the air, nobody can get hold of you, nobody, and you're not going to be browsing on YouTube or Facebook or social media as much either, because you're up in the air. I mean, you can buy Wi-Fi and do that stuff. But that's really how I get rejuvenated. I just air travel. I don't know. It's always been kind of my thing. Get out there, get away from home a little bit, and when you look back, then you don't see the problems. You see the problems in a different light. And so, that's typically that's how I like to rejuvenate. I also like to attend conferences. That's also one of the really powerful ways that I get rejuvenated. I went to RoofCon last year, which was an extremely powerful event. They had John Maxwell and Craig Rochelle there. And then they had the guy, James, I forget what his name is, but he calls himself the Iron Cowboy. He did, 100 triathlons back to back in 100 days. And so he had that guy. I had Ed Milet there. And so it was just a really powerful speakers. And that really recharges my batteries. I also go to the Global Leadership Summit every year. I'll never miss that. If there's any way I can, keep from missing it, I will never miss it. So, yeah, those are some of the things that I do. But outside of that, I don't really have a huge amount of hobbies. One other thing. I do try to once a year, we try to go to Guyana, South America for a visit. So that's always a very relaxing trip also.
It's interesting that you mentioned liking to fly so you can't be contacted. We have a gentleman that we were speaking with recently, and his routine every evening is when he gets home, he leaves his phone in his car for at least an hour so he can just not be contacted and just kind of shut down, kind of regroup for the day.
Yep.
That's, and I guess talking about solving problems, you're getting a metaphorically aerial view of what your problems are. Yep. And there's also some science behind the fact, the human mind, that once we, if you're sitting in a dark, small room, you're not going to be as creative as you are if you have a broad field of view, and, even driving down the road and just looking out over the horizon and things will a lot of times stimulate us, a lot of thought in us. So, what experience did you have before you went into roofing on your own?
Well, I started off, the very first job I ever had that was like the only job that I've ever had, to be honest with you. That was a W-4 or what, I don't honestly even know what they call it anymore, but you fill out, you put your social in, and you pay Social Security and Medicaid taxes and all that stuff. The only job I ever had is I worked in a body shop. And, the crazy thing is they must have really thought I was good or something, because they told me if I'd stay on, they'd give me the place in about 10 years. And I told them, well, I really appreciate it, but man, this is not my life. I just couldn't see myself working in inside and a body shop for that long. And so I only lasted for about 4 months, and then I went on a business trip, and I knew that I was going to go on this business. I made the business trip a priority because I knew where I wanted to go with my business. It was a conference, and I was at, well, I'm going to go on a conference, and I went, and then I broke down at the conference. And so they called me up and they said, well, they can't wait 2 weeks to fix a vehicle, blah, blah, whatever. That they're going to have to let me go because if I don't make my job priority, they can't hire me. And I understand that. They were completely right doing so. But I also had a very clear vision of where I wanted to go.
But then as far as in your roofing, I mean, so you didn't really have any experience before that. That's when you transitioned into the roofing is what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, that's right. When I got married, I started doing anything. Like I did literally anything. I did some concrete work. And one of the number one things is I don't think most people realize is the power of focus, is knowing exactly what you do, what you're good at. And so when I first started, I did concrete, I did drywall, I did anything. If you could name it, I would do it. Now,
if it paid, right?
Yeah, it paid. I did it. And I'm not knocking people that do that. I'm just saying though that when you get really good at one thing, you the specialist. When you go to a doctor, the general practitioner never gets paid as much as the specialist. And it's exactly the same in roofing or in construction. So, I soon realized, all right, well, I cut concrete out because you know what? That's a losing proposition. I'm not going to do concrete. I know that I can't make money on concrete. I'm not good at it. I don't enjoy it. It's just not my thing. So I said, well, I'm not going to do anything with concrete. And so I think as my business kept going, eventually I got to the point where I said, you know what? I only do exterior. We're an exterior services company. We only do roofing, siding, pole barns, decks, et cetera, et cetera. And then finally we got to the point, well, we don't do any decks or siding. We're just roofers and deck builders. We just do decks and roofing. That's all we do. And then finally we got to the point where we're professional roofers. We don't do anything with decks, siding, exterior work of any sort other than we are roofers. We're specifically roofers. We do shingle roofing, we do metal roofing, and we do commercial roofing. And then as time kept going on, we're like, well, we don't like shingles. We don't enjoy it. And it's not really where our major money is coming from. If you look at the Pareto principle, 80-20 rule, and you say, you know what, 80% of my money is coming from this. And so we just kind of kept refining it. And we said, well, now we don't do anything with shingles. Okay, we're not doing metal roofing on residential, and then we do commercial roofing. And I still remember the day that we decided we're not going to do anything in the residential industry. And it was pretty hard because it was way out of my comfort zone because it was always like, well, I know that on a residential side, you can really kind of depend on residential. It's very easy, fast money. It's not a lot of money, but it's easy and fast, at least in our area. I mean, residential is very easy to get in our area because of licensing requirements. I mean, in other areas, they do much better. But in this area, it just seems like it's not a huge moneymaker. So we made a decision. We're not going to do any residential, so it was way out of our comfort zone. And so we went strictly commercial. And over time, even in commercial, we got a little bit more selective about what exactly that we do. We promoted very heavily doing spray foam and coatings, which was what we were really, really good at. We knew how to make them work. We knew what systems you could install, how to install them. We knew the problems, and we had all the equipment, everything. We had everything paid off. And so we got to the point where, spray foam and coatings, that was really our thing. And, we cut out membranes. We didn't do membranes. We tried to avoid that stuff simply because we knew where our money was. And this is where I think is important in business is that we get very select. We got to know what we're good at and then focus on that and grow that. And there's nothing wrong with doing other things outside of that and experiment. But I'd say that 80% of what really works best is what we should really focus 80% of our time on.
Sure.
It's extremely simple.
Yeah, because I know because I've got friends and I know people, clients even that, they do construction, they do framing, they do different things. But you're right, they specialize in focus, and it seems like that's when they become most successful at it.
Yeah, because you don't have to have all the tools from all the different trades. You have the one trade, and you have the absolute best quality tools for that specific trade. and you are extremely experienced. Your guys know exactly what to expect. You do it every day. You get extremely good, extremely fast, and your crew knows exactly what needs to be done.
Right.
And you show up, and you get in, and you get out, and it was just that's kind of where I went from. You know, starting off with nothing, did everything, did less and less and less, and finally, the less we did, the more money we made.
Right. It's just, and you can kind of build out a system where you can duplicate your process so much more. One thing, I guess, what pushed you to go into your business? I mean, you kind of alluded to it, but there was a particular situation, but was that what it was, that situation where the car broke down? I mean, is that what was the final thing that pushed you, or was there something else that motivated you before that?
Well, what really motivated me is when we lived in South America, and I kind of, okay, we were not destitute, but we certainly didn't have a lot of money.
Right.
And you have such a poor mindset because you've literally struggled for it. Like, it seems like you're always broke or whatever. And like I think a lot of people can identify with that a little bit. In the beginning, when they get married, when they get their business started or whatever, they're usually pretty broke. I mean, it's just the nature of starting off usually. And so you really are cash strapped, you're financially, and that goes on year after year after year. You tend to feel like, all right, I can't stand this. I'm gonna do whatever it takes to not be so broke. And when we came back, I knew that I wanted to start a business. Now, I had done some summer work for my uncle, and I worked with him on his roofing crew. And I was kind of like, I was young, and I guess I was a little bit naive. I didn't know that you don't ask questions. But I asked him how much money he made, and he was nice enough to tell me, he made $18,000 on this project or whatever. And I was like, $18,000 for a couple weeks work versus I can go do a job and I can make $40,000. I mean, in my mind, it was no question about where I wanted to go with my business.
Did you start out as a one-man show?
I did. I started off, it was just me, and I did everything, and I just hired part-time guys to fill in.
When you talked a lot about the different stages of construction and how you were worked in the trade of construction in general. And you talked about a little bit of some of your struggles, but I guess, and maybe you kind of answered this question, but what was the turning point where you felt like things really started to click for you? I mean, was it that point where you focused on commercial roofing, or was it even before then as you kind of started to put your vision together to get there?
Well, it wasn't until after the first full year of commercial roofing. And not everybody's going to have the same experience, but I read a book called The Prayer of Jabez by Dr. Bruce Wilkinson. And it was such a powerful book. I read the book, and I kind of realized that, I think most people don't realize the power of, I believe that God has created all of us for a purpose. And we are here for a reason. Everybody's been created by God to not, and when God creates something, he does not create anything to not be successful. So when he created a tree, he knew that it would grow up and it would yield fruit after its kind forever. And he created human beings because he knew that we were supposed to be fruit. Okay, in the beginning it says, be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth. Now, be fruitful and multiply. Like, he wants us to be fruitful and be successful and multiply. Like have a lot of good things in our life. I truly believe that. And so I was like, well, these things are not happening in my life. And I think that I'm just not asking God to bless me. And so I just prayed. I said, Lord, I want a roof so massive and so huge that I know that you blessed me, that I know it was your blessing. And, the funny thing is less than 2 hours later, I get a call from a guy. And the guy's like, hey, we got this roof to do. And I don't know if you could, give us an estimate. It's about X amount of square foot. I think he said it was 10,000 square feet. And so I was like, well, you're looking at probably about $50,000. And then then he called me back about, 30 minutes later. He's like, no, we're actually going to have to do about 25,000. And then he called me back about 2 hours later. He's like, no, we're actually going to do about 50,000. And then finally the following day, he just called me back and says, yeah, it's about 100. I think it's actually about 90,000 square feet. And then by the time it's all said and done, it was like 135,000 square feet.
How many times did he need to call you till you went out and measured it?
Well, the roof was in Florida. I was living in Pennsylvania at the time. And you know, in my mind, I mean, this is the fall. I'm kind of broke. I mean, this is the first full year of only doing commercial roofing. I mean, it's not that we were broke. We were not destitute. It's just that it just seems like we should have been further ahead financially. And I think that as an entrepreneur, we need to have the mindset that you were never quite content to stay where we're at. We have to be happy, but we never allow ourselves to get comfortable where we're at. And I think that maybe I just got an extra degree of impatience as far as how fast my business was growing. But at any rate, I was very impatient. And so I had this high urgency that, you know, like, what can I do to grow my business? And anyway, so the guy calls me. I went down and we looked at the roof, and I was 21 at the time. And I mean, this kind of shows you the kind of trust that I had with my clients. And one of the things that I think is extremely important is the way you serve your customers. And I'll just kind of tell you a little bit about the story just so you kind of know what I'm talking about. So we ended up bidding the roof. It was like $1.4 million. And I'm 21. I'm 21. I mean, if I'm the building owner, some 21-year-old comes to me and tells me that he's going to do my roof and it's going to cost him $1.4 million. I'm just not sure that I could trust the kid. Like, I mean, that's how I feel, and I know in myself where I was at. And so we actually ended up getting the job. And I know that God blessed us with the job. But I think that not only we cannot be blessed by God if we don't first take care of the customer in small things. And I believe the greatest customer service that ever been given is the golden rule. And if you look back in, there's a verse in Luke 16:10, which is my personal business mantra. He that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much. But he that is not faithful in that which is least is also not faithful in much. So I believe that there's kind of an implied blessing in that verse saying, oh, if you take care of everything, the small things, then I can bless you with greater. But if you're not faithful in the small things, then I cannot bless you with anything. And so I believe that because I was faithful to the customer. Now, we had leaks with this customer. And I still remember days when we were like, man, we should just tell this customer to go fly a kite, because it just seems like every roof that we do for them, they just have all kinds of problems. And most of them were not our problem. I mean, it wasn't even like it was our problem. It was come down to the siding, or, there was a weird design, and we ended up with a little, jobs that are not pleasant. And in the beginning, I think in business, we have to be willing to do the things other people are not willing to do if we're going to get into business. Because, I mean, we're going to have to take what's left over. And anyway, so that's kind of how we built trust with the customer. We came back, even when there's a problem, even if it wasn't our problem, we came back, fixed it. And they knew they could depend on us. And so this customer knew that we would take care of them. And so I believe that is why, they wired $660,000 into our bank account, and they hadn't yet signed a contract. They really trusted us. And so, that's really when the turning point came in the business. And I don't think it's going to be the same for everybody. And I'm not saying everybody should all be out there praying for big roofs or big jobs or big customers or clients or whatever. But we were ready. We were prepared for the opportunity. And I believe that, we can put ourselves in a position that we ask for those things, and we pray and we ask God to bless our business. But I don't think God's not just going to automatically bless us with great things. But when we're ready, I think it can happen. And so it was just such an incredible turning point in business. That's really when things started happening, and probably, we just had a lot of capital. We were debt free, and we had all kinds of equipment. It just kind of really started going from there.
Well, you kind of answered my next question, and I can see a little bit about, and which was just the importance of relationships and customer service and your success. And I can see that's a high priority, that you take care of those clients, and that you really focus on that piece of it.
Well, there's really two things in my business. I do not deviate outside of this. When you have somebody call you and they say, hey, can you come out and look at my roof? I make it a priority. Unless they request otherwise, I'm on that project within 24 to 48 hours. And then after the bid, I get it to them within 24 to 48 hours. And then a second rule that I have in my company, and it's not a written rule. It's just, this is how I operate my company. This is how I train the guys. This is how I do myself. This is how we did it. Is when there's a leak, you get on that leak the same day if you at all can. and if at the maximum 24 to 48 hours, if there's a problem on the roof. And so I believe that is probably the single most important thing in our business is fast. It's not the big that eat the small. It is the slow that eat the fast, or the fast that eat the slow. So it's all about being fast, speed.
And the other thing that I think that was interesting is you made a comment to go back also a little bit even prior. What you said was the fact that you were prepared. And I agree, a lot of times we also probably know people who sit around and maybe and pray and ask for blessings, but they're not really doing anything to be prepared if one comes their way. And so I think there's also responsibility for folks to do. I mean, you're a good example of that you did prepare for the situation that when it arose and came your way. And that's just, I think that's a good life lesson, is we it's not responsible of us to sit back and just expect it to be handed to us for nothing either. There's a responsibility that comes with our talent.
Absolutely.
As your business was growing, you had a lot to learn. What was the hardest lesson or a skill, and how did you learn it? I mean, I'm just guessing. Well, I know this because I work with a lot of small business owners, and I've been one and am one. There's just things that come up that you don't experience before. Can you share one of those experiences with us?
Yep. Well, I believe one of the greatest weaknesses has always been, like, I'm not naturally consistent. And I think that one of the greatest tools in a entrepreneur's toolbox is consistency, because consistency compounds over time. It's like the leverage you can leverage almost anything. And so consistency gives you major leverage in business. And so that is something that I had to work on myself. And one of the things that I do on a daily basis, and you actually started off with this, was what's your morning routine? And I read my Bible every morning. That is it. I do it for two reasons. Number one, and I literally haven't missed a day in like years. I track it even, because I know that if I can be consistent, and anything that I do, I always look at it, okay, how can I be consistent? And I know that I really started learning this, and it's kind of a hard lesson, because and it's a lot of little things. I can't even really point out one huge thing that, okay, this was what really happened. I just noticed that, look, I'd have all this momentum going along a certain direction, but because I wasn't consistent, I would lose momentum, and I wasn't super aware of it until I realized that my inconsistency was what was holding me back. And now I have a daily battle against inconsistency. And there's a couple reasons. As a leader, if you're consistent, the people that you lead, or the people that's within your company, within your team, within your organization, what starts happening is that when you're consistent every day, people will start relying on the consistency, because they know they can depend on you because you're consistent. We can consistently depend on something. Then we start having there's a level of trust that goes in there, and we actually gain influence with the people that follow us by being consistent. And so that's something that I work on extremely hard, is going against inconsistency in my own life. And I'd rather not even start something than be inconsistent.
Another key inconsistency when you are in the position to lead people is, if you're consistent and the same issues that pop up, it pops up, it's going to happen. The people under you, they know how Jacob is going to react to that. They know how he is going to solve that problem. So it starts to take weight and decision making off of your shoulders, because you've already showed them, hey, this is how we do it, right?
Exactly. And you're absolutely correct. And when you're inconsistent, people, they don't know, they have a hard time leading because you're not consistent. And a true goal of a leader should always be to develop more leaders. And so when I, as a leader, have a leader on the team, I want him to, if I'm really a good leader, I want him to be better than me at what he does. That should always be my goal, to have people that work with me or for me, or, that I work alongside with, that are better than me. And when that happens is that I think that's why consistency is so important, because they know what to expect. If I always say the same thing about about a certain problem, like for example, never ever, like if there's negativity on social media, like I have a rule with myself, never ever post negativity on social media. I don't care what it is. I will never, I like, and quite frankly, I haven't done, like there's a few times that I've made a slightly negative comment and I realized, look, that was negative. I don't do that. But my personal rule is I will never post negativity on social media. I will not argue. If somebody posts anything negative, I will not argue. I might answer and explain something, but I will try to never ever respond to negativity unless it is relevant to something very important.
One thing I know you've started to do, and this is changing gears just a little bit, I know you do some podcasts or create a little bit of content and things like that. What's the name of that, or where can people find that?
It's called the Let's Get to Business podcast, and you can get it anywhere. It's like on 60 different platforms: Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, iTunes. It's pretty much everywhere.
Okay.
I don't know of a place that it's not.
Okay, that's good. And do you do those fairly consistently, or like just kind of as situations develop?
There's one that drops every Monday morning.
Oh, okay.
So I do schedule them ahead. So like this is where you sometimes have to leverage things to give yourself consistency.
Right.
And that's why like I don't actually record a podcast every Monday morning. That'd be extremely difficult. But I will record, I always have 5 to 10 ahead of time. And then if I do an interview or something, it might get a bump. Those might get bumped down a few weeks, but yeah, that's typically how I do it.
Sure. Well, and we do that too. We shoot extra there. What's as we wrap up, what's something you'd like to leave the listeners with?
Well, I think that probably the single most, the universality between all successful people is they are always learning. And people talk about personal development. I don't even know if the personal development is the right word. But the point of personal development is to learn about your business. And I would say, look at personal development as in, like in my business, something that I really recently realized is that 80% of my weakness, or 80% of all profit comes from 20% of my efforts. And I said, well, and 20% of my efforts was if I get better at marketing and sales. I'm pretty good at sales, but actually marketing I'm kind of weak on. So I said, well, I now do 80% of all my personal development goes toward marketing. Okay. I just, so I kind of think that personal development is probably the single most important thing when it comes to being successful in anything. I look at people who do personal development. I can almost guarantee they're going to be success. I don't know how soon, I don't know how long, but they are preparing. They are putting themselves into a position that when something happens, that they have the mental ability to handle it. They have the personal development, and personal development is almost overused, but personal development is simply becoming the right type of person, getting the right mindset. Getting the mindset of a leader, the mindset of an entrepreneur. The difference between Elon Musk and the poorest guy in this world is really only one thing. They have the exact same amount of time. They were all born, and they all have equal amount of time in a day. But Elon Musk has a completely different mindset, and he acts completely different. And that's why personal development is so important, is that it completely changes how we act because of our mindset.
Absolutely. Habits and patterns. And if we, as we create those, or should create good ones and new ones, it'll make all the difference. Jacob, I've really enjoyed this. And I appreciate you taking the time. I enjoy hearing your passion for helping other people and making a difference in other people's lives. I know this is going to be inspiring. And I want to thank you for coming on the show. And just to the listeners, you can hear this out on our platform on Spotify, iTunes, and Google Podcasts.